I've been watching TV and movies for 40 years, and I've seen a lot of good stuff and a lot of garbage, and for the most part, the good stuff has had a harder time finding me than the garbage. So I don't typically spend a lot of time looking for it. However, since the pandemic, I've spent more time than usual taking in television and movies. In 2022, I watched 60 television shows and movies, depending on how you slice it up. I'm going to run through these pretty fast. First up is Red Notice. I like Ryan Reynolds, The Rock, and Gal Gadot, but they had basically zero chemistry on screen together in this picture. This is probably the fault of the director, Rawson Marshall Thurber, whose career high point, I find after perusing his wiki page, was directing the Terry Tate office linebacker commercials for Reebok 20 years ago.
Oh, that ain't your cake, Philip. That's Simone's cake.
Those were good. The twists at the end of Red Notice were mundane and predictable, and when they happened, I didn't care because I just wanted this profoundly unfun movie to end anyway. I first saw Sylvester Stallone in Cliffhanger when it came out in 1993. I was 14 years old and thought it was just about the coolest movie ever. It should have stayed in 1993. Coach Carter is a 2005 MTV original movie starring Samuel L. Jackson. It's based on a true story about a high school basketball coach, Ken Carter. It was honestly better than I thought, probably because I imagined everything happening in real life. Reality can help carry you through a story. U.S. Marshals is a 1998 spin-off sequel to The Fugitive, starring Tommy Lee Jones, Wesley Snipes, and Robert Downey Jr. Audiences at the time didn't like it much, but I think that was due to the inevitable and fair comparisons to the blockbuster first film, The Fugitive. U.S. Marshals was a good action film, but The Fugitive was just straight up a good film. Here we have the 4-hour Justice League redo. HBO went all in on this, and if you want to know the whole saga surrounding the Snyder Cut, you can find a million videos on YouTube happy to explain it. But for my money, the Snyder Cut was a much-needed improvement over the theatrical release of Justice League, but in the end, it was still just a rompy movie that took itself too seriously. Space Force is not good TV, but I watched the whole first season because there were occasional zingers that made me laugh out loud. And John Malkovich is an overactor's overactor. The Batman is one of 3 movies I watched twice this year. I was disappointed the first time I watched the Matt Reeves Batman. I suppose I was expecting something else and instead got this gritty, realistic police procedural about organized crime and domestic terrorism. Upon a second viewing, knowing what I was in for, I caught moments of brilliance in this film. That's not to say it was perfect. I like Paul Dano in other films, but his Riddler was too much for me. Too over the top for this style of film. Zoe Kravitz, on the other hand, was great as Catwoman, and I liked how connected her Catwoman was to her Selina Kyle. And I wasn't sure how I was going to like Robert Pattinson. I'd only ever seen him in Harry Potter, so I didn't know if I liked him in serious roles or not. He portrayed a different Bruce Wayne than I'm used to, but I appreciate the direction that he, Matt Reeves, and the team are taking this universe. I never saw the original West Side Story, okay? And I still haven't seen it. I don't typically go in for musicals. Sorry, not sorry. But I liked this movie, and I can easily see why it's so popular. Lisey's Story is an 8-episode miniseries based on the 2006 Stephen King novel. The show stars Julianne Moore, Clive Owen, and Jennifer Jason Leigh. Great cast. I loved the book, and Stephen King also wrote the teleplay, so I went into this show with high hopes. But it just didn't work for me, and I can't exactly explain why. Part of it was Dane DeHaan's over-the-top portrayal of the villainous stalker. But even if that had been toned down, something just didn't work for me in the TV adaptation. Something was lost from the reading of the book. I'll call it
imagination.
It worked in my head when I read the book. It didn't work when I saw it on the screen. Squid Game was this whole thing in 2022, so I watched it. Now there's a reality TV show and all kinds of controversy surrounding that. Season 2 supposedly is in production, but I don't care enough to look that up to confirm it or not. If it is, I'm not sure I'm in for a Season 2 of Squid Game. Season 1 was a murder porn extravaganza whose appeal was so broad, it leached all the way into the kids' online game phenomenon Roblox. I personally know 2 7-year-olds who listen to the soundtrack and play Squid Game eliminations on their laptops. The Dig is a terrific film adaptation of John Preston's novel of the same name, starring Ralph Fiennes and Carey Mulligan. I haven't read the book, but I very much want to after seeing the film. Great characters, and the plot really got my curiosity moving. This is one of those rare films I can watch and enjoy with my mother. In the narrow Venn diagram of my mom and me, you can find movies like The Dig, Indiana Jones, and maybe, I don't know, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Not sure there's much of a narrative to critique here, but I watched the Golden State Warriors defeat the Boston Celtics in 7 games of the 2022 NBA Finals. It was a great series. I'd seen Mission Impossible 4, Ghost Protocol once before, but honestly, I can't get enough of these movies. I don't much care for Mission Impossible 2, but I love all the other films in the series, and I'm dying to see Dead Reckoning. Paddleton is a 2019 dramedy starring Ray Romano and Mark Duplass, and it's one of the best films I saw all year. My prediction is that Paddleton will reign as the best comedy about assisted suicide for a very long time. Star Wars Obi-Wan Kenobi. Okay. I love Ewan McGregor, and I have a huge soft spot for Star Wars. I read the 2014 Kenobi novel by John Jackson Miller. It even has McGregor on the cover. It was a good book. But they didn't make a miniseries out of that book. They did something else instead. They did something much stupider. I wish they'd just stop making Star Wars content, or at least consult me before they started filming it. That's right. I want to be the Star Wars gatekeeper. Nobody else is good at it. I didn't watch the World Series this year because I didn't care about the Houston Astros or the Philadelphia Phillies, but I did watch the NLCS. I had high hopes that the San Diego Padres would defeat the Phillies and advance to the World Series, but they lost in 5 games. 2023 will be San Diego's year, mark my words. When the Blair Witch Project came out in 1999, I had a very close friend who saw it in the theater and was absolutely convinced it was real. He was shook for days. And though I never believed it was real, I thought the found footage conceit was a neat idea. That was 1999. I am over it now. Watching Blair Witch Project in 2022 was tedious and not fun. I almost liked The Matrix Resurrections. The meta commentary got old real fast. Mostly, I just felt Resurrections was as unnecessary as all the other Matrix sequels. It was cool though, so there's that. But whenever I need a Wachowski fix, I just rewatch V for Vendetta or Cloud Atlas. Cloud Atlas by David Mitchell is a wonderful book, by the way. What does that have to do with The Matrix? Really nothing, but why not throw out reading recommendations? You like books, don't you? Top Gun Maverick was the second movie in 2022 I watched twice. I saw it the first time in the theater and the second time at a good friend's basement home theater. This movie had absolutely no business being as good as it was. It's up for 5 Academy Awards this year, including Best Picture, and while I don't think it'll win, I wouldn't be mad if it did. Wouldn't it be nice if a movie people actually saw won Best Picture for a change? It's been a while, right? The Hurt Locker won in 2008, and ever since then, it's been a lot of very good, very artistic films winning the big one. But sometimes big films like Titanic, Gladiator, Return of the King, The Departed, or Braveheart just need to come in and lay the hammer down. I think Maverick could be the hammer this year. But it won't be. Thor, Love and Thunder. Oh my god, the goats. I don't know whether to laugh or cringe. As always though, Christian Bale walks away the winner of this movie. The Hangover. I don't normally watch movies like this, so it took me 13 years to get around to see it, but I finally watched The Hangover. I see why it was such a cultural phenomenon at the time, but I won't be watching any of the sequels anytime soon. I started the Amazon series The Boys and liked what they were after, but ultimately it didn't hold my interest past 3 or 4 episodes. I saw Nope in the theater with my son. I had mixed feelings at the time of watching this, but after thinking about it basically nonstop for several weeks after seeing it, I think my thoughts evolved into the opinion that even if Jordan Peele isn't a perfect filmmaker, I love the fact that he's making quality movies and with more originality than we've seen in a long time. He also has a knack for capturing moments. I'm sure there's an industry term for what I mean, but he's a master at creating memorable moments in his films. There is no filler in Nope. I don't remember anything about Men in Black 3, really, except that the end made me cry unexpectedly, and I resent that. If I'm gonna cry watching a movie, I want to know going into it. Don't just spring it on me. 13 Lives is a 2022 Ron Howard film about the true story of 12 boys and their soccer coach getting trapped in a flooded cave in Thailand. The film focuses on rescuers as the rescue operation was audacious and controversial. The rescuers were portrayed by Viggo Mortensen, Colin Farrell, Joel Edgerton, and Tom Bateman. I was on pins and needles for the entirety of this very swift 147-minute runtime. It was only after the film had concluded that I realized I was never properly acquainted with the boys who were being rescued, though. But I'm not entirely sure how Ron Howard was supposed to keep the audience appraised of the welfare and mental health of 13 people trapped in absolute darkness, so I'll give him a pass on that. I started watching The Terminal List with Chris Pratt and was originally... I didn't watch The Terminal List with Chris Pratt, only that he stars in the show. I watched The Terminal List with my friends Mike and Rebecca. Anyway, I was originally drawn in by Pratt's portrayal of a soldier with PTSD and depression, all the while dealing with a tragedy involving his SEAL team. But the show devolved from there and settled into a lone wolf revenge tale that just missed me. I checked in on the show as Mike and Rebecca watched the whole season, and everything I saw kind of confirmed my worst prediction that everyone is a bad guy and only James Reese can kill them. It wasn't for me. Mike and Rebecca liked it a lot, though, for what it's worth. Mike also has a crush on Chris Pratt. Fall is another film I saw in the theater with my son. This one had my palms sweating as my son balled himself up in his theater seat and watched the girls climb that tower between his knees. It was tense as hell. So if you want to torture yourself, it's worth watching. But as a story, Fall was terrible. The second half of the movie included a few twists that annoyed us pretty bad and really took us out of the movie. I'm going to make this public service announcement. Not every movie needs a twist. Okay? Free Guy was better than I expected it to be. And I'm assuming it was written by a consummate gamer. It wasn't a great movie by any stretch, but there were a few Class A jokes hidden here and there. Once again, I returned to Logan. It's one of the few movies I have downloaded on my iPad. I have seen this movie so many times and I never get tired of it. In all reality, it's probably my favorite superhero movie of all time. I watched 11 NFL football games in 2022, but since I don't have a way to watch at my own house, I had to visit Liz and Ahmad's house for all these games. Thanks, guys. Chiefs and Eagles next week. I am making chicken tortilla soup for the house. Don't let Kathy cook anything. The Thing is the 2011 prequel to the 1982 movie also called The Thing. I don't understand the naming convention. Why not The Something or The First Thing? I don't know. My sister and my best friend Phil are both huge fans of the 1982 film, and especially of Kurt Russell's MacReady character. Unfortunately, the 2011 The Thing doesn't have any characters as iconic as the 1982 The Thing, but it's a pretty rippin' film all the same. A worthy successor, or precursor, or whatever. Red Dwarf. Very few people know this BBC science fiction sitcom from the 90s, but I basically have the first 8 seasons of the show memorized. It's honestly terrible, but I find the campiness truly genius at the same time. It would probably be pretty hard to find your way into Red Dwarf in 2023 if you didn't already have that tether back to the 90s, but not impossible. My teenage son loves it, so I'm doing something right, I guess.
I need to know that I have done one thing right with my life.
Grand Budapest Hotel and Royal Tenenbaums. I'm just going to group these films together here. I watch and rewatch Wes Anderson movies a lot more than any other movies, especially these two. Grand Budapest Hotel is based on Zweig's memoir, The World of Yesterday, and his personal experiences, whatever that means. So I need to add The World of Yesterday to my TBR. Okay, attack me all you want, but I finally watched Casablanca for the first time in 2022. And you know what, everyone? It's a really good movie. You should watch it. Smile is a 2022 horror film starring Susie Bacon. Is it Sosie or Susie? I don't know. And Jesse T. Usher. It got terrific reviews, but I thought it was pretty lame. I'm sick of the horror genre trying to make everything scary. What if we made dolls scary? What if we made sofas scary? Hey, what if we made smiling scary? I'm over it. You know what's scary? Monsters, serial killers, aliens, ghosts, guys with chainsaws. Well, probably enough with the chainsaws already, but you get the point. Alright, so everyone seems to have loved Bullet Train except me. I didn't so much as crack a smile the entire movie. This was the most unfunny action comedy I've ever seen. No exaggeration. I'm stratifying this out with 100% seriousness, so I'll say it again. This is the least funny action comedy I've ever seen. Tangerine and Lemon were good characters, and I would have rather watched a movie just about them. But Michael Shannon, Sandra Bullock, Zazie Beetz, and Brad Pitt were all wasted. They were a snooze fest. Which, was a surprise to me because the director, David Leitch, was responsible for Deadpool 2 and Nobody. Both movies I saw and enjoyed. Spider-Man No Way Home was the best Spider-Man movie ever made. Any questions? Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness was a messy verse of sloppiness. There was some very cool Sam Raimi stuff with the demon cape and all that, but aside from the endless visual swirl, I didn't care about anything happening in this movie. Even with the appearances of Reed Richards, Captain Carter, Captain Marvel, and Charles Xavier, I mean, come on, you can't just kill them off with a snap of the fingers and expect me to believe that literally anyone else gets out alive. It's not edgy to kill off these legends. It makes the multiverse itself a disposable concept when the characters within the universes are disposable. Final verdict, who cares? Morbius is quite possibly the best superhero movie I've ever seen. I take back what I said about Logan. Morbius takes the cake. Everything about this movie trumps Logan. From the visual bonanza fight sequences, to the coloration, to the tight script, to the individual performances and pacing, Morbius just does it all right. Alright, why did I watch Geostorm? Better question, once I started and knew for sure what I was watching, why did I continue watching it all the way to the end? I don't know for sure, but I was probably drinking. Blame it on the whiskey and cokes. Geostorm wasn't even at the level of So Bad It's Good. It's just so bad. There's a film a ways down on this list that enters into So Bad It's Good territory, and I'll let you know when we get there. So National Treasure came out in 2004, and it took me 18 years to catch up to it. I'm not really all that surprised. It's not exactly a film for adults, is it? And I didn't have any kids at the time this movie was released, so this one just missed me. I'm not sure why I ended up watching it this year, but it was fine, something to do. I'd rather just watch Indiana Jones again, I guess, but at least it was better than any of those Dan Brown movies. I was digging Shang-Chi for the most part, except for the late act comedy relief of Trevor Slattery. I mean, I'm not really sure what Ben Kingsley is thinking with this role. Give it up, sir. Anyway, I liked the family dynamics this movie was exploring. Children who can never be good enough for a demanding father, and mourning the loss of a mother and trying to live according to her guidance. It was all good stuff, thematically. And then at the end, there's this huge CGI dragon fight, and all of a sudden, that good character stuff just sort of falls off to the side. It's pretty disappointing. The Eternals is a long-ass Marvel movie featuring an ensemble cast of heroes nobody's ever heard of before and has as its center a planet-sized god called Arishem the Prime Celestial. Arishem looks imposing, very cool, and really ought to be a terrifying antagonist for the heroes of Earth to face off against, but this movie's story around the Prime Celestial plot was horrible, overlong, and worst of all, it was boring. I'm pretty sure we're going to see Arishem again. How could we not, the way the movie ended? But I just hope when it returns, Marvel's writers are up for the challenge. Murder, She Wrote was a long-running TV series in the 80s and 90s starring Angela Lansbury as Jessica Fletcher, a schoolteacher turned mystery writer. What's the twist? Well, the thing is, literally everywhere Jessica Fletcher goes, somebody dies, and it's up to her to solve the mystery of whodunit. And she's never so much as nonplussed about these deaths, and often puts on a show of being hesitant to get involved at all, but she always does, and she always figures it out. This sleuthing of hers is a real boon to her career as a mystery writer, and she goes on to outsell the entire genre. I watched all of seasons 5 and 11, that's what they had at the library, and I really considered becoming a fully fledged Murder, She Wrote expert, but in the end, I thought, nah. I've never played the video game Uncharted was based on, but just like with Red Notice, I like Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberg and Antonio Banderas, but these characters just whiffed with each other. This movie was dull and lifeless, with two big exceptions. The two big action set pieces of the film, the fight sequence on the cargo falling out of the airplane, and the fight ranging across twin airborne Magellan-era ships carried over the sea by helicopters. But these were so ludicrously over the top, one can do nothing but scoff at the screen. No Time to Die is a fantastic 007 film. Maybe not my favorite, but it's up there. It was a great way for Daniel Craig to say goodbye to the character. I'm very much looking forward to the future of the franchise. My only hope is that if they plan on linking several films together again, I hope they plan it out a little more coherently than the last several Bond films managed not to do. I've seen Primer before, and even on the rewatch, I still don't understand what happened. It's probably really smart though, right? I watched the extended edition of Hateful Eight, the 4-episode version on Netflix. I just really like Jennifer Jason Leigh and everything, and Kurt Russell smashing that guitar? Whoa. Good times. Moonfall. Okay, this is the one. 2022's Moonfall is so bad it's good. In fact, it's so bad it's fantastic. I loved watching this movie, and I plan on watching it again many, many times. This was a nonstop WTF moment movie, and the budget was huge. I mean, 146 million, I think. So the WTF moments look superb. I felt like Roland Emmerich must have co-written this movie with 7-year-olds who have lots of way cool ideas. Do yourself a favor. Pour yourself your drink of choice, pop that corn, and lean into this one with all your best friends. Home Alone. I went to a Christmas party with a few friends, and we're all of a certain age where we grew up with Home Alone, so we opted to have a few drinks and rewatch this classic. Always fun. The 2022 version of All Quiet on the Western Front is a deeply moving tribute to the 1928 novel by Erich Paul Remarque. Remarque is a German-born novelist, was condemned by the Nazi Party as unpatriotic, and ultimately fled to the United States, where he became a naturalized citizen. The 2022 adaptation is largely faithful to the book, but adds kind of this clicking clock aspect to the film, which adds to the tension as we go into the final act. It's wonderfully hard to watch, but really all war films should be hard to watch if they're being honest. I watch the Lord of the Rings movies every year at Christmas. It's an annual tradition of mine. I do not watch the Hobbit trilogy. That movie does not exist in my multiverse. I watched season 8 of the reality show Alone over the course of 2 days. I was totally hooked on how this group of men and women survived in the bear-infested Canadian wilderness. I actually found myself moved by the sheer heroic effort these people put up to stay out in the wild. Truly, it came down to mind games over tests of survival skills. Great show, sparsely produced as well, which I appreciated. There's enough inborn tension in the lives of these contestants already without some host rambling on and on trying to sell the melodrama. Along with Red Notice, Uncharted, Geostorm, Morbius, and Moonfall, Ice Road was one of the worst movies I watched all year. I don't know how to sort that list exactly, they all sucked, but Ice Road was particularly bad because it never even glimpsed fun or cool or interesting or clever or entertaining. I mean, Geostorm and Moonfall were terrible films, but at least I was entertained. Liam Neeson and Lawrence Fishburne called it in, and the villain, played here by Benjamin Walker, was the least believable baddie in recent history. The Queen's Gambit has probably been the best TV miniseries I've seen in a long time. It was released in 2020, but it took me a while to get around to finally watching it. How regrettable. I should have jumped on this when people were telling me to watch it years ago. The show is about chess prodigy Beth Harmon, who develops chemical dependency issues while living at an orphanage in her youth. While also living at the orphanage, she's introduced to the game of chess, and this changes the trajectory of her life. The show is about addiction as much as it is about chess, and Beth Harmon must master one game to compete in the other. It's remarkable. Mr. Harrigan's Phone is a mediocre movie based on a mediocre novella by Stephen King. The novella comes from King's forgettable 2020 collection, If It Bleeds. Moving on. Glass Onion felt like what happens when a masterful writer takes all of mystery's most enduring tropes and combines them. I watched Glass Onion twice on back-to-back nights. It was very different from Knives Out, but as a spiritual successor, it really held true to the larger-than-life aspects that make Knives Out such a success. But do watch Glass Onion. Watch it twice. So there you have it, the 60 films and television shows I watched in 2022. I don't know if I'll watch this much again in 2023, but if I do, I'll certainly keep track and let you know next year. If you haven't watched it yet, I suggest checking out the video I made called Everything I Read in 2022. That's about the books that I read. The link is in the description. Please enjoy, and I'll see you in the next one.